So yeah, scanxiety.
Yeah.
April 2014 comes and, well, a lot happened, and there were these little signs, spots on your arms, bumps, light purple coming up, and they were explained away by doctors, right? So what finally was the realization that something was, was wrong?
When they started to grow a little more, I'd had one little spot on my side, kind of by a rib area, and it was not even as big as a quarter, and it wasn't really purpley at that point, so it didn't really look the way multiple myeloma often looks, where it's more purpley. That came later, and it was sort of slow growing too, but it did start to grow. And then I got one on my arm, and what happened is it was finally biopsied, and then they knew that it was cancer, and it eventually showed up in PET scan too and had other spots.
So they knew that the relapse had happened, and the next month they put you on Velcade and Revlimid. But I'd love to understand, Connie, because I know you go through a laundry list of different treatment regimens. What were those conversations like? And also, we'll delve into the patient advocacy part of it later, because I know your background working in healthcare allowed you to have some insight on this. But what were those treatment discussions like with your MD Anderson myeloma specialist?
I always knew that Dr. Weber was going to do what was the very best for me, and the cutting edge, the newest treatment available that fit my type of multiple myeloma. And, so she would discuss that, like with extramedullary multiple myeloma that had gone to the tissue, that, you might have better results, for instance, with Revlimid than something else. And, we usually treated it pretty aggressively though, but yet still keeping in mind, like, it was important to not do damage to your kidneys or, along the way, and monitoring the white counts and everything. But I didn't have a lot of choice in the actual, like, which treatment it wasn't like, oh, there's all the treatments, you pick one. No, she picked because she's the expert, and usually it was lots of times it was just something new, because multiple myeloma in the past 9 years that I've had this has just come up with so many more treatments. I mean, Revlimid was almost the only treatment when I started, that besides really harsh chemos. And then it just seemed like with about every 6 months there was something new coming out, and I was fortunate to usually get to try then new combinations.
Yeah, no, and we'll dive into the new treatments and the landscape shifting at the end as well, because it's very exciting and it's a lot to wade through. So it sounds like you did defer to your doctor, but she included you in the discussion and wanted to understand, impacts to, of course, your body, the long-term impacts to your kidneys, for instance, and quality of life. Did that ever come up?
Oh, definitely. And they definitely took into account that I was young. And one thing that I had to get used to was that it was necessary for me to take pain meds on a regular basis. And maybe I didn't really want to, but that was going to balance out and allow me to do what I needed to do and not live in pain, But we were really cautious with things about neuropathy, especially during the beginning. And I didn't even realize how important that was something that wasn't going to go away oftentimes and become a really big problem. But I remember the first time I felt some neuropathy, they pulled that chemo from me because, not being able to walk and that feeling in your feet is just, of course, super critical. And I have neuropathy now, some, but it's never gotten as advanced as a lot of people I know. And, I have a family member that suffers just a lot with neuropathy. So I think that there again, telling your doctor if you're having even small symptoms of neuropathy is important.
Right, and it's a word we hear a lot being used when you're talking about side effects. I think people think like, oh, is it just like numbness and tingling? But no, it really interferes with
Yeah.
your ability to function, depending
A
on where you're
lot of
feeling
pain. Yeah, a lot of
it.
pain. And then, since your feet are a little bit numb, then you might not feel like even that you bumped it. And, that's why people get like infections in their toes and don't know it and stuff. So it is a huge problem with cancer but you can work around it. And actually, I've been successful with like gabapentin to treat the neuropathy now.
Can you say that name again? And it's just, it basically, is it a pill? Is it a shot?
It's a pill and it's gabapentin. And there's lots of different doses, so you just have to find the right dose for you. So
Perfect. Okay. And I know you had experienced that after the Velcade and Revlimid. Is that right? With the neuropathy?
yeah, it was from the Velcade, as I recall. So
Yeah, we've heard that from other people as well. And so you were in remission, but then there was the neuropathy issue. The next year, November 2015, you're on Cytoxan and Pomalyst. So it was your first time with Pomalyst. Do you remember? I know you had said with the Cytoxan, nausea, it's pretty
right,
common.
right.
And you had Zofran to help combat that.
Right. Well, and I do remember my doctor telling me that to think of Pomalyst as like a cousin to Revlimid, and that was actually positive to hear because I hadn't had a lot of side effects with Revlimid, and it was nice that it was a pill because just that's one less trip been sitting in a hospital getting IV. Like when you talk about quality of life, I think it's awesome whenever you can, if you can get your therapy in a pill form and just take it at home and that way your weeks aren't lined out like, oh, chemo Monday, chemo Tuesday, like you're just taking a pill every day is easier if possible.
It allows you, what I'm hearing, to live life actually, right?
Right.
Instead of all the drive time and waiting in the clinics. And
Right.
I see here too, Connie, that you had, I mean, dexamethasone, the steroid, is very common in a lot of these different combinations. You were on it as well. It did lead to a pretty big side effect for you, cataracts.
Yes, yes. And at first, when I just started seeing things more gray, I guess you'd say, and shadowy and a little bit hard to see, like at night driving. I just thought, oh no, like what if the cancer's gone into my, eyes or brain, or like I have to admit in that point it was a little panic about the eyes. And so I was so relieved when I found out it was cataracts and could just easily be fixed. So, so I had double cataract surgery and it was a breeze.
Perspective is everything, right? And so for some people, cataracts is like, oh my gosh, but for you, it was like, ooh, that's a relief.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, yeah.
So I know you stayed on the Cytoxan, Pom, and Dex for a while, and then in 2017 in February, so about a little over, so it was since November of 2015, right? Yeah, so a little bit over a year you were on it, and then something was very visible on your right clavicle, which you sent pictures of, and we will show people because it does get quite large. Can you talk about what happened?
I just started out with like about the size of a pea size little tumor on my clavicle, and actually it wasn't picked up originally on the PET scan either, but that's where it was both a blessing and a curse because I can actually see the tumor and see how I'm doing, and know to get treatment early, because it really was like my best diagnostic tool, because with my kappa light chain multiple myeloma, it doesn't always show up in the blood test, at least not until it's a little more developed, but yet we could see this growing. And so then that meant, yes, it's back, time for different treatment.
I know that you go through this several times. This is, I don't want it to sound like a weird question, but does it get easier or harder?
It gets harder every time. I wish I could say that it got easier, but you just, even though you know it's an incurable and that's kind of the path you're on, you just get so hopeful. Maybe you even get used to a chemo and you're like, you know, the routine. Well, yes, I take an anti-nausea pill once a day and that works. And I take this for acid reflux, and you have your regimen down, and even you're driving to your therapies, you know what to expect. And just about the time that you're into a routine, boom, it changes and you've got to change therapies. And also just being told again, you know, like maybe it's been in a partial remission and then it would come back in my spine or something. So you're just like, oh, here we go again. And you're concerned that it's going to be aggressive or that other treatment isn't going to work. So I think that it's just mentally it is challenging it's like a roller coaster. But I always feel better once I get a plan in action. And then like, even, you know, once I know the treatment and I start doing it, then I'm okay again. But I have to have sort of a plan out there. So it's that waiting in limbo, because lots of times you're waiting on the doctors to decide what treatment's best for you, or for insurance approval, or just for scheduling, you know. So, and with me, where I coordinated care with MD Anderson with an oncologist that was closer to me, that usually took an extra couple weeks in there, just even for the doctors to communicate and decide.
I love what you just shared there. In particular, 2 points. One being the waiting is the hardest. It's when you don't have a plan, you're waiting, you just you want to have something solid and concrete. So, you know, okay, here's the path forward, right? The second being, you know, the roller coaster of it. Now I understand that it's like you have something figured out, you're on a regimen, you're like, here's my side effects, here's what I do to combat them, here's my schedule, I pop a pill these days, and then to have to start over again.
Right.
Wow. So I know you go through this a few times, Connie, and this time around, your doctor said, your oncologist said Darzalex was the way to go. Can you describe that? This is 2017. Can you describe at first it was Darzalex, then a few months later they had to add Pom as well. Can you just describe what those were like?
You know, there again, and Stephanie, I never thought I would forget, but honestly, I think that, you know, just being honest, like lots of times now all the chemos have blurred together in their side effects, you know. Right. I didn't, though, have a lot of trouble with Darzalex until it was combined with a different treatment later, as I recall. But the Darzalex with just like the Revlimid or Pomalyst wasn't as bad.
But I know it was Darzalex or Daratumumab, and then it was added with Pomalyst in June, and then a few months later after that, you added Cytoxan again because there was disease progression. Right. Which Cytoxan, you mix that into anything, you're bound to get a bunch of fun stuff.
Yeah, Cytoxan's one of the worst. So when I say some of them are a blur, well, the Cytoxan was pretty bad, but they're again treatable with like Zofran and stuff. And I'm one of those people that like, I will go ahead and take the anti-nausea meds and the acid reflux and the, you know, the different things if they'll help. I'm not one to say, oh, I don't really need it, I can tough it out. Like cancer's tough enough, like with everything to go through. I say accept the medications and use them, you know, the way they're designed to be used. And I say with pain too, you don't have to live in a lot of pain if you just monitor it correctly, you know. So
yeah, and again, speak up to your point many times about this. And so Connie, then in December we see bendamustine, Revlimid, and Dex, and you put side effects for low potassium. They caused leg aches, fatigue, and a lot of you were neutropenic.
My neutropenic, yeah, I was neutropenic a lot, and so I would have Neupogen shots quite regularly. And that being neutropenic, you're really tired and you ache all over, especially your legs and stuff. So plus your immune system is jeopardized. So you know, it was scary to be going out in public, but yet, so that's where you had to balance, like whether you should go to a social event with all your friends or you should stay home. So kind of like how people are doing on a regular basis with COVID, but I was doing that years ago, having to make those tough decisions of whether to go out and about and enjoy something and wear a mask, or maybe best just to stay home. So I did miss some important events because of not wanting to be around crowds and stuff during flu seasons and stuff.
Yeah, you're used to this. You're pro, and when everyone else was trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
I know that, you went through a couple other, regimens. You had the Revlimid again, and you stopped the bendamustine, and their white counts were suffering too much. You had diarrhea, acid reflux, fatigue. Then you were on Kyprolis and Pomalyst, and more white blood count issues. And so you had to skip treatments, right?
Right.
And at this point, we're already into 2019. I do want to get into the CAR T and the NIH trials.
Right.
But let's dive into that in a second. You did get the CAR T, and that whole experience is what we're really going to talk about, which is all the in-between stuff, waiting for it, having to qualify.
Right. Yeah.
But one of them, the CAR T did really help you, right?
Yeah, actually, both of them showed some success. It was just not as long as I would have hoped. And when you put into perspective that you're there at the NIH for a few weeks, plus for a clinical trial like that, you needed to go monthly for the first 6 months. So traveling from Wyoming to Maryland is quite a feat in itself. So you put all that in, but I did get months of not having to take another chemo and giving my body, like my kidneys, a little bit of time to heal. There again, my main problem was being neutropenic. My white counts were low with the CAR T cells, but I was running out of options. And so what really the CAR T cells did was they bought me time until research could come up with another new therapy. And honestly, in 2019, the therapy that I ended up going on, like I had the CAR T cell in May, and the treatment I ended up going on that fall had just been FDA approved, I think in August. So like it wasn't available for me when I needed something back in like March and April. So, and the CAR T cells, they just didn't work as well with me as they did with a lot of the other patients. As far as long term, they worked very quickly, and like the pictures are proof of that. I mean, it was incredible to watch a huge tumor just shrink away. Like daily, you could look in the mirror and go, wow, it shrunk again. So there again, that's the blessing and the curse. I had this pretty ugly looking real skin tumor, and so it's visual, but at the same time, then you get to see the good when that cancer is going away.
Right. Yeah. Double-edged sword there. And like you said, sometimes it was great because you could see it earlier than it might have shown elsewhere. Right. So then after the CAR T, you did have the tumors growing again. So you did the POM, Kyprolis, and Dex. Then in 2020, we're at the second NIH trial. Can you talk about that one?
Yeah, I was so surprised when I got a call from NIH that they were going to do the same CAR T cell again, and that, I fit the requirements when the first trial was trying to find which amount of cells was the optimal amount, and not to give you too much or too little. And so when they thought they had found I'll call it magic amount, that's what they wanted to do in the second CAR T cell. So it was still the same type of trial, and it actually was a much higher dose than I got the first time. So I was the first person ever to do the second dose of this anti-BCMA. And so that was a little bit scary, actually being the first, but yet at the same time, I'd already had one CAR T cell, and it was going to be basically the same, just with a different dose. So it was maybe going to be a little bit harder side effects, but they weren't even sure if that was the case. So I slipped in under the radar in that one though, because I had that CAR T cell in March 18th. So as we all know, COVID hit right before that. So I had arrived, I think the end of April at NIH, and they quit taking patients like I was one of the last patients that I think that probably I'd come from Wyoming, and if I hadn't come from so far, they might have sent me home. But you know, I made it in to be able to do that.
Well, and I'm so glad, because I know it worked for a few months at least. And yeah, timing is everything, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it worked for a few months, but then the growth was happening again. So in the fall of 2020, you're on Kyprolis and Darzalex,
Right.
which did lead to infusion reactions. And so you increase your Benadryl and anti-nausea drugs, right? But Connie, it got so bad, you asked to start a different treatment.
I did, and I think there was a lot of factors there, and I honestly I was just a little bit down then too, and just didn't have that motivation to take on being sick. So I needed a little bit of a break, and it just, you know, things did work out though, in that I ended up finding something that worked better, the Blenrep. And so, and actually even when I said enough on the other one, I knew that the Blenrep was on the horizon. We were just waiting for it. And so, you know, I'd heard really good things about the Blenrep, except for that the visual toxicity, the eyes, you know, and pick me, something can happen. Lots of times it does. And so I did, with the Blenrep, have a pretty bad side effect with the vision. So
it's just, I think, a lot of insight hearing you talk about it. Like, you're on something and then you're like, oh, there's the other thing. I've got my eye on the thing coming up on the horizon.
Yeah. Right.
So you did move to Blenrep, and you know, you did say the initial reactions were, quote, mild compared to previous treatments.
Right. Yeah.
There were some headaches, but in the beginning it was pretty, would you say, pretty seamless?
Pretty seamless. Yeah. I mean, fatigue and everything, but that was around the holidays then. And so, you know, I was tired anyway. And lots of times you know, you have to counter in what else is going on in life with that and stuff like that. So, and I did radiation right after the Blenrep too. It was the first time they decided, mainly for palliative care, because of the pain of the tumors were so large and everything, to do the radiation. But it ended up, the radiation was a bigger success than they thought it would be too. So, and they didn't really know, we'll never really know whether it was the combination of the radiation and the Blenrep, that, because then I ended up going, almost like 7 or 8 months without needing any other treatment, you know.
Yeah, I guess it is tough sometimes, because you've got different things going on to be able to fully attribute the success to one thing or the other. But on Blenrep though, altogether, you were on that for how long? Do you remember?
I only had one treatment, and then my eyes got so bad that I couldn't have another treatment. And then there was lots of follow-up with having the eyes checked and everything regular. So lots of trips there for, because I actually had like blisters on my retina. I believe that's right.
Your cornea?
Maybe it's cornea. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it caused really bad blurred vision. At first it was with everything, like, well, you know, we've all become users of our little phones and computers and stuff. And I think that I thought, oh, that won't be that bad, you know, if it's not total vision loss. Well, when you can't read a text or anything, although I became a little more techie as far as being able to learning to audio and even have the phone read, you know, audio the message back to you and stuff. So it taught me a few things, but you know, you couldn't do things like Facebook and read emails and stuff, but that part only lasted a few weeks. But then the part where seeing in a distance, like driving, was harder for longer. And I'm experiencing that again now, because I had Blenrep in August, and now I'm still experiencing a little bit of the blurred vision at a distance again.
Yeah, it's tough. It's like, it works well in one area, but with the quality of life impact, it can make it pretty difficult to want to continue.
Yeah, and they don't let you continue once you've had a reaction. Well, they will let you have it a second time once you're recovered, and that's what I finally got to do it the second time in August, but had a reaction again. So now, even though Blenrep did work to treat the multiple myeloma, I can't have it anymore, which, and that's the way it should be, to be cautious and not let someone lose their vision over it.
Right. No, not what a critical function
Right.
in
Yeah.
terms of living our lives. I appreciate you sharing that. I know you mentioned the radiation already. That was after the first Blenrep, and it did decrease the tumors quite successfully, like you said, a little bit of a surprise. And the tumors did start to gradually come back. And so you did a lower dose of Blenrep, like you said, in August of this year. You did get the keratopathy again.
Yeah.
So then now the latest thing has been going on to the Pomalyst and Dex.
Right. Well, I'm also waiting for another new novel chemo.
Yes.
I was waiting for it to get approved, and it seemed like, and other people that are listening that go through cancer, they'll know what I'm talking about. That kind of run around between the healthcare facility and the insurance and saying, well, we're waiting on something from them, and blaming it on each other. And I find it so important, because this time I delayed a little bit, that getting on the phone and, staying on hold an hour or however long it takes to get hold of the insurance company and say, I thought that this would be approved. And so I actually just did get approval for the, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but Cytoxan, but I haven't had a dose yet, but it will be next week.
Oh, and we'll, love to, stay in touch, of course, and get updates on the isatuximab, which is trade name Sarclisa. I was going to ask you about some of these other new, treatments that are being used in combination a lot. Hopefully it'll be great. You'll get a great response from it, since it's new, for you. And with the insurance thing, I do want to ask one quick question about that, just because, for instance, I'm in the process of scheduling my PET CT, and my doctor was like, well, you have to wait though, because we have to wait for insurance to approve it, and then you can do this. And, do you have any other tips? I heard you say, stay on the phone. It can be a full-time job. Do you have any other tips, I guess, for people? Because you've done this so much now.
I usually try to even get like the phone number and the lady's name. If they'll give you a phone number, like if insurance says, well, all we're waiting for is this, if you can get their name, and if they'll give you a direct line, then you can tell the hospital personnel in the, that's doing the finance research or whatever, to say, hey, call Henry at this extension and stuff. So I try to usually make their job easier by hooking them up together. Now, not always will they give like their direct line, but still, I will work until I get to the person that's really in charge of it. Like sometimes at the hospital, like this last time, I found out that insurance had been contacting like the nurse, the actual, office, and they weren't contacting the patient's financial services, the correct lady, and when I got to her, then I could work with the insurance. So it, and you just have to try to be nice, even though it's really frustrating sometimes. But of course, it's usually, it's not anyone's fault. It's just, there's a lot of miscommunication in healthcare. So I really think that, we talk about electronic medical records and all these things, but we are so far away from having any type of really good system that, it's not all coordinated together. And it's especially difficult for someone like me, because basically I'm dealing with a hospital right in my own town, though, that's really small, that maybe I will have labs, then a hospital that I'll have my chemo and tests sometimes. Well, it's considered locally 180 miles away, and then traveling to MD Anderson or when I was going to National Institute of Health. So I'd be dealing with 3 facilities and having to coordinate the communication between them.
I think what you said is so true. We hear so much about technology, and yet the one place that it really needs to, take hold, there's no true adaptation and adoption of. So yeah, one place has one thing, and it's hard to figure it all out, and it is a full-time job. And then we're about to talk about clinical trials, which should, because of course people who are looking for clinical trials, I mean, time is of the essence, right? It's not some luxury.
Yeah.
So before we move into this last section, where I'm really excited to talk about the patient self-advocacy, just how are you doing now? I know you're on this Pom and Dex, waiting for the isatuximab to start next week, but how are you feeling?
I've been more tired than normal. I think I realized that with the Pomalyst, and I had forgotten, but it reminded me that Pomalyst causes back pain, and I've definitely had some more back pain and a little bit of nausea. But because of the steroids, I'm eating better, which I probably needed to. Like, I just hadn't been that interested in food, and so the steroids have made me kind of crave food again. And I actually think I probably needed to eat better, so that's a positive. But I have a lot of pain too in my bone pain still, but overall I'm doing okay. I mean, it's amazing, 9 years out, and like I always think I'm still better than when I first started out. So yeah,
that's a great perspective.
Yeah.
And so you're, in terms of like the disease progression right now, where are you?
Well, that's when we talk about scans. I just had a PET scan yesterday, so I won't know until tomorrow what the results are. But my PET scan before this didn't show a lot of disease, except for in the skin on my like chest area, and there wasn't like any new bone lesions. So it was, but the kappa light chains that they measure had gone up significantly. They were way out of line. So there's definitely myeloma showing in the blood in a significant amount, but just hadn't been caused like new lesions yet that they could detect. But probably not doing that well. I definitely needed to get going on a treatment.